Virtually everyone on the earth, regardless of religion or nationality, recognize that there is some form of battle raging in the world around us between the forces of good and evil. A colossal struggle between light and darkness, truth and error, oppression and freedom, right and wrong, and ultimately life and death. What is the story behind this glaring paradox? Many religions, including the Bible, teach that beyond the three-dimensional veil of our physical world we see, there's another very real spiritual world we cannot see. In this unseen realm ever about us, we see a titanic battle raging between the supreme righteous hero and the ultimate evil villain. The big question is, who are these primary players? And how, where, and when did this cosmic crisis begin? This is the greatest mystery of the ages and the most amazing true story that has ever been told. This crisis now involves every person on Earth. Yes, every person. Our story begins long ago in the very capital of the universe, in a place called heaven that was filled with angelic beings who delighted to do the will of God. Under the Creator's just and loving government, all of heaven enjoyed an existence of happiness and perfect bliss. To carry out the commands of God, the Trinity was surrounded by a virtual ocean of countless ministering spirits called seraphim and cherubim, or more commonly, just known as angels. These powerful and intelligent creatures found their greatest joy in doing the bidding of the Almighty. But God created one extraordinary angel to serve as leader of the entire heavenly throng. The Bible tells us that his name was Lucifer, which means light bearer. This cherub was the greatest of God's created beings and held the position closest to God's throne. Lucifer's job was to communicate the light and knowledge of God's will to all the other angels. Lucifer was God's most splendid created being. He was captivatingly handsome and endowed with astonishing powers of leadership and organization. Among the angels, he was greatly admired, respected, and loved as a friend.
Full of wisdom and perfect in beauty, every precious stone was your covering. You were the anointed cherub who covers. I established you. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked back and forth in the midst of fiery stones. You were perfect in your ways from the day you were created, till iniquity was found in you.
As Lucifer began to ponder his own beauty and power, his heart gradually started to change. He allowed his focus to turn away from God, and he directed his love upon himself.
How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning! How you are cut down to the ground, you who weaken the nations! For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High.
Lucifer gradually began to covet the power of God, but not his character. As he thought about his own extraordinary abilities and beauty, the cancerous tentacles of pride and self-exaltation gripped his mind. This resentment and jealousy ultimately drove him to violate God's holy law and rebel against his government. Lucifer knew if he was to ever share the power and status of God, he would need support. So he went to work. He began to deviously circulate among the other angels, planting seeds of doubt and discontent regarding God's leadership. At the same time, he would subtly highlight his own virtues. He insinuated that God was abusing his divine power, and his law was restricting the true freedom and happiness of his creatures. With his clever reasoning and unrivaled powers of influence, Lucifer managed to persuade a great number of the angels to join him in his mutiny.
Woe to those who seek deep to hide their counsel far from the Lord, and their works are in the dark. They say, who sees us, and who knows us?
So now, the big question was, how would God respond to this crisis? How would he deal with Lucifer and the millions of angels who joined him in his rebellion? Many wonder why God did not immediately destroy the rebel. After all, he could have easily vaporized Lucifer with a bolt of lightning. But would that have really solved the problem? No, on the contrary, that would have just intensified the doubts and suspicions that Lucifer had been planting in the minds of the angels. Remember, Lucifer knew, as no one else could have, the inner workings of the government of God. His destruction would have been viewed as part of a massive cover-up, and fear of reprisal rather than love would have become the motivating reason to serve God. No, the Lord knew in His wisdom the best way to meet the crisis was to allow it to run its course. This would be the only way to ensure that evil would never rise again.
Let both grow together until the harvest. And at the time of harvest, I will say to the reapers, first gather together the tares and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn.
In the parable of the wheat and the tares, Jesus illustrates that a growing time is needed for a plant to reveal its true nature. In His infinite understanding, God knew, given time, Lucifer's real character would be exposed, and the bitter fruit of his rebellion would become apparent to all. As Lucifer and his supporters brought the rebellion to the forefront, the Lord knew that there would be no peace if they were allowed to remain in heaven. A line must be drawn, action taken, and the rebels evicted. But Lucifer and his supporters would never go willingly or peacefully. The next step was war.
And war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought, but they did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him.
The Bible doesn't reveal exactly what weapons were used or how long this cosmic conflict lasted. But this was a war the likes of which no mortal eye has ever seen. Revelation 12, verse 4 tells us that ultimately Lucifer and 1/3 of God's angels were physically expelled from heaven. But what next? Lucifer now had millions of angels on his side, but he needed a staging ground from which to continue his revolt. Soon, all too soon, the universe would begin to understand how painful and costly the wages of sin could be. For the war was not over. It had only just begun. Lucifer, the light bearer, had now become Satan, the adversary.
Ra